The European hare has invaded Brazil, where it is devastating crops and could become an even more difficult problem to control than feral hogs. Local residents call it the Big Rabbit. At first glance, it looks like nothing more than a large and harmless animal. But behind that adorable appearance is a creature capable of running at 60 kilometers per hour, reproducing continuously, and wiping out an entire field of young crops in a single night. The worst part? While farmers are allowed to control destructive feral hogs, they cannot freely stop these hares because of complicated legal procedures. A new crisis is quietly spreading, while local residents remain powerless to act. Forget the image of slow-moving domestic rabbits, because the European hare is an entirely different animal. Native to Europe and parts of Asia, it has a larger, slimmer body, exceptionally long hind legs, and distinctively large ears. A fully grown individual can weigh more than 5 kilograms. Unlike domestic rabbits, which usually dig deep underground burrows to hide, European hares do not. They choose to rest directly on the ground, concealed inside shallow depressions and perfectly camouflaged beneath low grass and crop residue. They live in open terrain because they have tremendous confidence in one ability: speed. When it detects a threat, this animal does not remain still. It charges forward in a straight line at speeds reaching 60 kilometers per hour, before suddenly changing direction again. This ability to make abrupt turns at high speed challenges most natural predators. These physical characteristics have transformed South America's agricultural landscapes into a paradise for the species. Vast fields of soybeans, corn, and wheat covering thousands of hectares, mixed with grasslands and orchards, provide everything they need: open space for escape, ideal hiding places, and an abundant year-round food supply. But European hares did not cross the ocean and reach South America on their own. Their presence here resulted from a human decision that eventually triggered one of the largest mammal expansions in history. Do you know how they accomplished it? The story began in 1888, far from the Brazilian border. Dozens of European hares were transported by ship from Germany and released in Santa Fe province, Argentina. The purpose at the time was simple: to establish an animal population for the sporting hunts enjoyed by the upper class. Similar releases were later carried out in several other regions of Argentina and Chile. They did not realize that they had just created a serious ecological mistake. The hares discovered enormous open landscapes, a seemingly endless food supply, and a climate almost perfectly suited for reproduction. History had already recorded the rabbit disaster that devastated Australia during the 19th century, when only 24 original rabbits multiplied into billions and stripped the vegetation from an entire continent. And in South America, that scenario is now repeating itself with the European hare. From Argentina, they spread across almost the entire country. Then, without any further human assistance, they crossed national borders and entered Uruguay, Chile, Paraguay, Bolivia, and finally, Brazil. In Brazil, the earliest records were concentrated in the south, but the species soon advanced into the central west and southeastern regions. The latest survey data indicates that the population is expanding its territory at a rate of approximately 45 kilometers per year. This does not mean that one hare runs 45 kilometers, but demonstrates that each new generation is rapidly pushing the limits of its range farther forward. Their pregnancy lasts only slightly longer than 1 month. A female can continuously produce several litters during a single breeding season. Leverets are born with their eyes open, their bodies fully covered in fur, and the ability to move immediately, giving them an exceptionally high survival rate. But their enormous numbers and rapid expansion are not the worst part. Their nighttime feeding behavior is what truly pushes thousands of farmers toward desperation. Everything usually happens in silence. Farmers inspect their fields at dusk and see that every crop is still growing normally. But by sunrise, they discover entire rows of plants bitten clean through or pulled completely from the ground. In crop fields, European hares consume large quantities of young soybean, corn, and wheat plants. In vegetable gardens, they clear out lettuce and carrots. But the most serious damage occurs in fruit orchards. These animals habitually feed on new shoots and small branches while scraping the bark from young trees. When a complete ring of bark is removed from around a trunk, the pathway carrying the tree's sap is completely severed. The tree cannot recover and will inevitably die. Farmers lose all the work they invested and are forced to uproot the trees and begin planting again from the start. The total economic damage caused by invasive alien species in Brazil is estimated at nearly 15 billion Brazilian reais every year, and European hares are contributing a significant share of that enormous figure. Local residents have tried every possible method to fight back. They have installed scarecrows, used automatic nighttime lighting, produced loud noises, sprayed repellents, and even erected electric fences. But this animal is exceptionally intelligent when adapting to new conditions. Deterrents remain effective for only the first few days. The hares eventually realize that the noises and lights cannot harm them, and they return to feeding as usual. When faced with fences, they learn to jump over them, dig underneath them, or locate the smallest opening through which they can squeeze. Only strong wire mesh buried deep underground and built to a sufficient height can keep them out. But this solution is practical only for small plant nurseries. For fields covering thousands of hectares, surrounding the entire area with fencing would be irrationally expensive and completely impossible. So, when they cannot be stopped, why are people not allowed to control their population in the same way that thousands of licensed hunters already control feral hogs? In the previous two parts, we learned that feral hogs are also invasive animals. They tear up the soil, spread disease, and prey on native species. In response to that problem, authorities introduced a specific federal regulation allowing registered individuals to control, or more directly, legally eliminate feral hogs. But no equivalent nationwide permit exists for the European hare. The truth is that simply being classified as invasive does not mean humans are free to remove an animal however they choose. In the case of this hare, farmers cannot immediately use force whenever they see it damaging crops on their own land. Every form of physical intervention must first receive approval from an environmental agency. To obtain that approval, residents must collect evidence of the damage, submit an application, present a detailed control plan, and wait. The administrative process moves slowly, while hare reproduction is measured not in months, but in weeks. By the time the control permit is approved and delivered to the farmer, a single female may already have produced 2 more litters, while the field has been reduced to bare ground. This delay has created a wave of anger throughout the agricultural community. On one side are animal rights advocates, who argue that hares are sentient creatures and that eliminating them is inhumane. They view the problem from offices in the city. On the other side are farmers who lose sleep every night while watching their livelihoods being eaten away. This enormous difference in perspective has made the government hesitant to reach a decisive conclusion. When farmers remove European hares without valid authorization, they can face heavy fines and legal consequences under environmental protection laws. The situation has become a vicious cycle. The animals continue consuming crops, continue reproducing, and continue entering new areas. Meanwhile, the only legal defensive measures available to farmers are prohibitively expensive, ineffective, or buried beneath complicated paperwork. The people suffering the damage therefore remain unable to act quickly enough to stop it. But do you know what happens when people are pushed into a corner? They begin crossing the boundaries imposed by regulations. Some farmers who can no longer afford to wait have quietly started searching for unofficial methods under the cover of darkness. An unauthorized control operation has begun to take shape. People are being forced to work secretly on their own legally owned land simply to protect the income they need to survive. When a law unintentionally forces farmers to solve the problem themselves, it is a clear sign that the management system is seriously flawed. This is the central difference that, in some respects, is making the European hare a far more difficult problem than feral hogs. The contrast is impossible to ignore. But when we look beyond Brazil, we discover that this tragedy was predicted long ago. The warning came from a country that had already spent more than a century fighting an almost identical enemy. Human helplessness in the face of rabbits and hares is nothing new. Just look at Australia. The struggle between humans and rabbits in Australia is considered one of the greatest failures in the history of biological control. In the late 19th century, the Australian government became so desperate over rabbit destruction that it decided to construct a fence stretching more than 3,000 kilometers across the continent to prevent them from entering the western region. It became known as the #1 rabbit-proof fence, the longest fence of its kind in the world at the time. And what was the result? A complete failure. Rabbits tunneled underneath it, slipped through open gates, and rendered the enormously expensive fence useless. Authorities later introduced a species-specific virus designed to weaken the rabbits' immune systems and spread through their population. At first, the method killed enormous numbers of animals, but natural evolution changed the situation. The rabbits that survived quickly produced offspring resistant to the virus. Their population recovered strongly once again. Despite spending vast amounts of money and applying countless technologies, Australia has still been forced to live with the damage to this day. Europe has not performed much better. In Britain and Spain, even though rabbits and hares are native animals, population explosions driven by climate change and a shortage of predators have also created serious problems for farmers. The experiences of these continents offer a severe warning to South America. Never assume that rabbits or hares can be controlled easily once they have established themselves inside an ecosystem. If a fence more than 3,000 kilometers long could not stop them, then a few simple deterrents in Brazil certainly will not succeed. Feral hogs are large, move noisily in groups, and leave unmistakable evidence in the form of severely damaged and overturned soil. They are easy to detect, and thousands of licensed personnel are already prepared to confront them. European hares, by contrast, operate in the darkness. They live alone or move in very small groups. They slip through vegetation without leaving large tracks or making noticeable sounds, and they are often discovered only after entire crops have disappeared. Their destruction occurs silently, but advances at a devastating rate. The damage extends beyond economics and threatens the structure of the natural environment. When hares consume all the low-growing vegetation, native grazing animals suddenly lose their food supply. They are forced to compete against a creature that runs faster, reproduces more frequently, and consumes more food. Native herbivore populations may consequently decline, disrupting the food supply of predators as well. One small animal is destabilizing an entire ecosystem that took thousands of years to develop. Researchers and farm owners continue calling for a national policy specifically addressing this species, similar to the system already used for feral hogs. They need streamlined control procedures, a monitoring system that tracks the movement of hare populations, and technical guidance on intervention methods before the species advances farther into other sensitive ecosystems. Without coordinated national action, every region will be forced to confront the invasion independently. In early 2026, several debates emerged in Congress proposing the use of thermal cameras and contraceptive bait systems to reduce hare numbers instead of firearms. However, every proposal remains only on paper. While people continue debating inside meeting rooms, the hares continue eating and reproducing in the fields. Each week of delay allows the invasion to spread even farther. Without timely changes to the regulations, an animal originally introduced merely for recreational hunting will continue redrawing the agricultural map of an entire region. From the 24 rabbits released in Australia to the European hares now spreading through South America, history has proven one lesson: never underestimate the power of animals that appear harmless, especially when they discover a landscape without natural predators. Brazil must now make a rapid decision to confront this silent epidemic before the final young crops are eaten away. The expansion of the European hare is only one piece of the broader ecological disruption now occurring around the world. Human decisions made hundreds of years ago continue producing consequences that today's generations must endure. This is a profound lesson about human intervention. A few dozen hares were transported across the ocean merely to satisfy a temporary desire for recreational hunting. More than 100 years later, millions of people are being forced to bear the consequences. We cannot blame the hares, because they are simply following their natural instinct to survive. The true source of blame is human arrogance and the belief that we have the right to rearrange nature. Reality has repeatedly shown that when humans play with natural systems, nature always finds a way to produce unpredictable consequences. We must learn how to balance environmental protection with the need to defend the livelihoods of the people who directly produce society's food. If you have watched until this moment, you are clearly someone who enjoys real-world stories that examine agricultural and environmental issues in depth, just as we do. To support our team in producing more high-quality videos, you can become a channel member for as little as $7.99, and your name will appear at the end of every video alongside our other supporters. Remember to press the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe the law should prioritize environmental protection, or should it be relaxed so farmers can freely defend their livelihoods? Leave your opinion below. We will see you again in the next video. Goodbye.